Okay, you can start now.
Good, thank you. So welcome to the meeting. I'm just struggling to move my agenda around now. Here we go. So I've got the hands button. That's where everybody disappeared briefly then. So have we got any apologies for absence tonight?
Okay, you can start now.
Yeah,
I haven't received any.
Yeah, so we've got no apologies for absence. And we've got no declarations of interest, I don't think. Have we? We're already public, so I hope there's no matters to be considered in private, because we'll have to go private again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did communicate with Paulette, and she did indicate that she was going to come, but I haven't got any apologies to give on her behalf.
Yeah, but we were expecting her tonight. But
we were.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that. So I hope that you've had a chance to read the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on Wednesday, the 23rd of March. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? Stefan, I can see your real hand and your blue hand. That's multitasking for you. So unmute yourself and say what you want to say.
Under item 8, Catholic academisation, it was to generalise out from that. Councillor Nagpal, I know you're very new to this, but I am asking in terms of, is the position of Ealing Council remains the same with regards to its manifesto and the past on academisation? Are you still opposed to academisation?
I've only had this portfolio for 2 days, Stefan, so you'll have to forgive me that I don't have a response to that, because we actually are working on a new manifesto, which is going to take us into the elections for next year. So you can leave that with me and I can come back to you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm sure that's a point that we will continue to discuss. Are there any other matters arising from the minutes?
Councillor Shaw's got his hand up.
So if you'd like to speak, Councillor Shaw.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, just to say that, you know, as far as I'm concerned, as a member of the Labour group, obviously there is a new administration, as Councillor Nagpal has just said, but, you know, we haven't sort of changed position on academisation and where we are. Obviously, it's not always our choice. It is in the choice, you know, it is a school's choice and can get sort of forced upon us as an authority. But, you know, as a general principle, you know, certainly I am still opposed to academisation, and I believe that, you know, that is most likely to be our position going forward.
Okay, well, thanks for that. And Stefan, you want to come back on that?
Yes, it's a key question. In the past, we have been grateful for the support of the MPs and the council when interacting with parents, when some schools have wanted to convert to academisation, and we are obviously anticipating and hoping that that will remain the case in terms of the support that we may have in the future, considering the comments that Gavin Williamson has been making recently.
Yeah, okay. So thanks for that. So are there any other sort of comments on the minutes? I mean, it's more about the correct record, but I'm taking matters arising as we go. So can I move on from the minutes now?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So in terms of the next part on the agenda, that's urgent matters. I'm just reading the text of that the mayor has agreed should be considered at the meeting. So the mayor hasn't been in touch. So I don't think that there are any urgent matters. And so then if we get onto the agenda proper now, I think COVID-19 staffing guidance for schools, I think that's council side. So who would like to talk to that? Stefan, you've got your hand up again.
That'll be me, Mandy. It's Mark.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm
Then
just
thanks, Mark.
see if my video is going to start.
Yeah.
Okay. So at the beginning of May, we updated and revised our staffing guidance. It's a document that's lived with the pandemic. It's been with us now for about 14 or 15 months. And hopefully most schools and colleagues in the room that have had to use it find it a very useful and informative document. In the May revision, we looked at it over the Easter holiday, and we updated a lot of the links and flow charts. But in addition to that, we removed 2 sections in the guidance. One of the sections was about how schools deal with non-COVID sickness, and we didn't feel that was needed anymore because we're resuming to a more business as usual state, and we get very little, if any, queries about that, certainly now. We also removed another section which was about staff who have other paid employment as carers for CEV or CV people. Again, we've only had 1 query on that issue since the start of the pandemic. So if any more were to arise, we'd deal with them, but it wasn't needed, if you like, in the general guidance. All other sections were retained, and that included the advice on pregnant staff, because we got quite a few queries from schools about pregnant staff. And we've maintained a very cautious approach. And we've also included the latest link to the government advice on vaccinations for pregnant women, because that advice has changed recently and they're now advising pregnant women to have vaccinations. So that particular section in the guidance remains very cautious, and I've spoken to a number of heads about that in the last week or 2. So we're still advising schools to exercise particular caution when a woman is in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy, as all of the government and medical advice still suggests. I think the other thing that we just pointed out was that as we reach milestones in the government's roadmap, and we've reached one, further changes may be necessary. I don't see that right this minute, but I did want to bring to your attention as well that earlier this week I issued an email to head teachers in relation to international travel, because we've had a few queries. And the email basically said to heads, it reminded them of the current travel regulations. It gave them some background around red, amber, green countries and what the various restrictions are when you're traveling to those countries. And effectively what we've said is, if a member of staff takes leave to go to a country knowing, for a non-essential reason, by the way, knowing that when they come back they have to quarantine or isolate and they can't resume duties, as a minimum they would lose pay, and it may also be a matter of some formal action against them because they're knowingly going away knowing that they can't come back to school after half term. We have said in the same guidance to schools that we accept that the position's different if you travel to a country, for example, that's on the green list, and then while you're abroad, it goes on the amber list. And we all know those things happen. So I don't know the quantum of staff in schools who are leaping over to Portugal for half term or not, as the case may be. But even if they go onto a green list country, there are still rules and regulations to follow. So we issued that earlier this week, but we just issued it to heads because we were getting queries in from schools, which meant that we wanted to give them the same general and consistent advice. And I suppose that's about it, Mandy. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just from my point of view, because I'm the health and safety rep in my school as well, and it's been very, very useful having the Ealing guidance. It's meant that we've been able to sort of have a broad borough approach. So I appreciate the work that's gone into that, because it does mean that we can keep our schools consistently safe. So thank you for the work on that. is
Thank
I
you.
can see I can see Stefan's got his hand up. I just want to, before I bring you in, Stefan, just want to welcome Paulette. Thank you for joining us tonight from the NASUWT.
Sorry, I'm late. I
Yeah,
was in the middle of the meeting.
Yeah, and if you do want to if you do want to add anything to any of the discussions tonight, please do find your blue hand, which is in the participants near the participants button, and you'll be able to find your raise hand there.
Thank you.
Okay, so Stefan, you want to speak?
Thank you, Mandy. I concur with the comments that you were making, Mark. That's we accept, agree. My question was, I understand the position that if they go travelling and it's green and then it turns amber, what is, forgive me, I might not know this and everyone else does. If you go travelling abroad and it's amber, does that mean you have to quarantine when you come back?
Yes, you have to isolate for 10 days. You have to have a PCR. Yeah, I could go through it, but you don't need
No,
it.
yes,
you
that's
do.
enough. Clearly, if they then go and it's on an amber, they shouldn't have gone in the first place. Thank you.
Other than for an essential reason, we accept that there are essential reasons for people to travel to amber list countries. You know, a very seriously ill near relative, a funeral of a very near relative, for example. So we accept there are, if you like, exceptions, but certainly not for recreation or vacation purposes.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be going to amber list countries.
Yeah, with that bit of information, I concur. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Are there any more questions or comments around the staffing guide, the COVID-19 staffing guidance? Matt, I can see you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on pregnant women and vaccinations. Is that government guidance that they can now book an appointment and get vaccinated?
Yes. So the government, if you remember, in the early stages of the pandemic, they weren't anywhere in the list of those to be vaccinated because there wasn't enough information. So recently, the government changed its guidance, which and looked to say that pregnant women should look to come forward for vaccination. But can I put the caveat in? Each pregnant woman will take advice from her own clinicians or doctors about the need for her to have or not to have a vaccination. But the general direction has changed, Matt, and they're now, in general terms, they are now advised to have the vaccination.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep. Okay. And any other questions about that, Matt? If you can just lower your hand, that'd be helpful as well. Yeah. Dee, you're waving at me. Does that mean you want to speak? I can't necessarily see everybody.
I'm working on a new laptop and I haven't quite got my head around it. Just clarification again about mask wearing. I know that it was gratefully received that masks wearing was to be extended until the end of May. Has there been any other further updates on that, given the current Indian variant and where that may lead?
Well, I don't know if any colleagues of mine would know. As far as I'm aware, we're encouraging schools to retain the mask wearing protocols until the end of May, so the May half term, when it will be reviewed. Obviously, we're not there yet, and once we do, subject to local circumstances, I imagine a further decision will be made. Sorry, Dee, that's not saying a lot.
Okay. That seems to me, Mark, as if you're waiting for somebody else on this call to say something. So
I don't know if anyone would know any more than what I've just said, but if they do, they can come forward and say that.
Yeah, that's right. I can see Councillor Sharma is indicating, and David Milliken's got his hand up as well. So Councillor Sharma and then Councillor Minicam. You need to unmute, Sharon.
I just have to express my disappointment at the government not giving, teachers not being able to get vaccines. I just think that should have been a priority. I just had to say that because I feel so strongly that teachers should really have had the vaccine along with other key workers such as the police and so on.
Yeah.
I just express that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that solidarity, Councillor Sharma. Councillor Millican.
Yeah, I mean, I only know what I read in the newspapers, Mark, but as I understood it, masks are no longer required within high schools. So, but at what point that cuts in, I'm not sure. But that was my only, as I say, I only know what I read in the newspaper. So the government have obviously announced something about high schools, secondary schools not wearing masks. Obviously, they're not needed in primary. We know that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that despite the fact that the government said it's no longer a requirement, in terms of keeping everybody safe, it's by far the best thing to do is to strongly encourage. Those were the words that I think my head teacher used, which I think came from discussions with secondary heads and, you know, Ealing as a borough as well. So Mark, I think you wanted to come in again. Do you want to come in? But I've got other hands as well.
I just wanted to respond to Councillor Millican to say he's correct. From the 17th of May, the government said there shouldn't be a need for mask wearing in secondary schools. So I think the decision in Ealing was taken locally, and it was a combined thing. It wasn't one section, if you like, imposing on another. I think secondary school heads were quite happy. Given the local circumstances, I think the trade unions were happy, and I think the council was happy to recommend that we continue up until the May half term, which is another 2.5-3 weeks.
Okay, so in terms of hands then, I noticed that Councillor Sharma, you still got your hand up, so I don't know that if you want to come in again, I'll bring you in a little later. Thank you, Sharon. Stefan, and then Tamara wanted to say something as well.
Mark is correct, Councillor Millican. The government did say no masks. However, ASCL, which tends to be the secondary head teachers union locally, the NHT, which tends to be the primary head teachers locally, and ourselves all urge the council to extend masks, because the last thing we want is for schools to go back into another lockdown. No one wants that. And therefore, for the sake of a couple of weeks, especially with the prospect of an Indian variant taking hold, we urged the council to stay cautious. And thankfully, we all agree on that.
Yeah. Tamara?
Yeah, it was just to add that there are provisions within the Department for Education's guidance around contingency measures for schools, particularly where there are variants of concern for local directors of public health to provide additional advice to schools. So ultimately, our Director of Public Health strongly recommended that schools continue with mask wearing in community areas and in classrooms, while the kind of the outcome of the variant of concern kind of works its way through the half term. So it may well be extended given the position that we're currently in beyond the half term, and we'll communicate with schools, and we're in constant communication with unions and school leaders around that.
Okay, thanks Tamara for that. Any further comments or questions around the staffing guidance for COVID-19? Okay, Tamara, you still got your hand up. I'm assuming that you don't want to come back in. So let's move on then to paid religious leave, and this was the union side. So who's going to pick that up? Is it Stefan? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to talk for teachers, and this is one of the reasons why I asked Ealing Unison to attend. I would have also tried to invite Ealing GMB, but it was impossible to speak and have contact with them. As everyone will be aware, Eid has passed, and this often brings up issues in terms of paid religious leave, but it isn't just teachers who are practicing Muslims. There are Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists, Coptic Christians, and Jews who all have their holy days outside of the Christian calendar. The Christian calendar is centered around the Christian holy days, which is where the word holiday actually comes from. And so therefore, for a long time, teachers have had the right to take 3 days paid religious leave, which is a local Ealing terms and conditions. otherwise that's discriminatory, because unlike someone who works for Rolls-Royce or Tesco's or whatever it may be, you can take your paid leave to practice and celebrate your holy days whenever you choose to. You can take your holidays whenever you like. But if you're a teacher, you have to you can only take the holidays when they're given to you. And those of minority faiths, the ones that I've just mentioned, cannot, obviously, they fall during the school term time. And therefore that's discriminatory. And we are pleased to see that has been kept. But the one thing that has arisen is that for some practicing Muslims, but not all in my experience, their mosque, their imam, insists that they take 2 days for Eid and sometimes 3 days for Eid. And this has been a question that has come up in a number of schools. And I wanted to get confirmation and feedback that the 3 days paid religious leave isn't individual days. It can be taken 3 days in a block or in 1, 2 or 3, in the same way that teachers are entitled to 5 days paid leave for a sick child. You can't look after them one day and not the next day. So that was one question I wanted to ask. And also, Cam, if I may, we are hoping that will also be something that will continue to be the position of Ealing Council. And I'll leave Danny to talk about support staff and then agree with him.
Yeah. So just before I bring Danny in, I also have a memory that we had to debate sort of religious leave. We got a bit hot under the collar about whether or not 3 days was allowed a few years back, and the council side confirmed that there would be 3 days paid leave. But so I have a memory that is the council position, which ought to be reflected in certainly in those schools that are under the local authority remit. But the difficulty is that what's happening in some schools is that people are being told that you can only have 1 day at a time. So staff aren't being allowed to have the flexibility to actually take those days together. So that's definitely a live issue at the moment. So if people want to just comment around that, it would be helpful. So Danny, are you able to just say something about what you're finding for the people that you represent, the support staff that you represent?
Of course, yes. Can everybody hear me? Thanks.
Yeah.
I've got the mute button off. Firstly, I just wanted to confirm again, thank you for letting me speak. I did think that had been cleared, and I apologise that it hasn't. So thank you very much. I also know that this is not the type of forum that I'm normally at, but I think it would be a good idea to consider moving forward how that works. We do have our own mechanisms within Unison to raise our school-based issues, particularly with the Council and Trade Union Joint Committee that the NEU don't attend. So, this is useful for me to be able to give a view about support staff. And I also appreciate that the NEU are aware that this is, something that they can speak for on behalf of teachers only, and that's why you wanted a view from us. Paid religious leave does not apply to our members as support staff, just so everybody's clear on that. We do, however, have some schools and some head teachers who do agree paid leave for our support staff members, and so there can be some discretion within that. But the general feeling amongst our membership is that at the moment there is somewhat of a two-tier system, and that it's creating some division. And given that people are working in the same workplace and work alongside each other, where some people might be able to take paid time off to celebrate their religious festivals, our members don't have that right. And I know that conditions can vary between different staff groups, but when it's happening in the same place, and when it's to do with a protected characteristic like being able to practice your religion and having a job where our members are pretty much all term time only. Some are all year round, but even then they're encouraged to take their holidays during the school closure periods. It's difficult. And we even have some members as well who may not have a particular religion, who also feel quite strongly on the issue that why can't they have some additional time as well? So it is a bit of a minefield. But what we would be looking for, and what I'd like this committee to be aware of, is that we are going to be pursuing this with the new leadership at Ealing Council, because we think it is an issue that is important for our members, but for Ealing's community as a whole, and for the schools, places where we're supposed to be, teaching people about religious freedom and fairness and equality. So we want everybody in the workforce to be able to have access to a type of additional leave, and that's what we want to start having a conversation with Ealing about. So as I said, we are aware that some head teachers already do pay that. We are aware that there isn't an easy answer for some schools because of the sheer number of staff that celebrate Eid. But I think what I wanted to say really was that we see this as an important matter to take forward, particularly that with the fact that Ealing has a race equality commission going on at the moment, so we'll be looking to raise it there and try and make sure that our members can be able to practice their religion without suffering detriment, which, because of the school that they work in and the type of contract that they come under, means they can't really work in that environment without not being able to take quite important days off in their calendar. So that's really what I had to say from our membership. And I know this is not the forum where I raise points and ask councillors or colleagues within Ealing Council for their comments necessarily, but as I said, I was approached here by Stefan to just give a view, and that is our view, and moving forward we will raise that in the appropriate forums that we have.
Yeah, well, thanks for raising that. I can see that Mark's indicated, but I also noticed that Councillor Nagpol's indicated, so I think I'm going to let Councillor Nagpol speak first and then come to Mark, and then Matt, you've also raised your hands as well. So Councillor Nagpol.
Firstly, I don't think this committee deals with support staff. I think it is just teaching.
Sorry, you're very quiet. You weren't so quiet before. So
sorry, can you hear me now?
Better. Yeah, that's better.
Right. So I think this committee deals just with teaching staff, not support staff. But also, I mean, with regards to the 3 days paid leave for religious purposes, I mean, I don't know how it's documented in any contracts, if you can take 3 days together or if it has to be 1 day at a time. I mean, perhaps the officers might be able to advise me a little bit on that, please.
Yeah, that's the issue that teachers have been met with this time round, and we're individually sort of digging into our schools policies, and we can't find that. We can't find the clause that says it's got to be separate days, but that's why we've brought it here. So Mark, would you like to speak now?
I will. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's fine.
Am I on video?
No, you're not on video at the moment.
Okay. Am I now? I am now.
Yeah.
Okay. On the days, there isn't any stipulation either way. It says 3 days in any year. So there isn't necessarily a way of saying these have to be in single days, 2 days at a time, or 3 days. What's very interesting, and I'll tell you this anecdotally, is that staff in the same school request different number of days for the same religious festival. So imagine how heads have to deal with that. Mm-hmm. I thought you only needed 1 day, but you're asking for 2, or you're asking for 2, and that one's asking for 3. So that does create difficulties and complexities. You gave some context, Mandy, and I wanted to add to that context, if you will permit me. Mm-hmm. The reason we discussed this a couple of years ago was because head teachers in Ealing asked the council to review the religious leave provision. They obviously weren't looking to review it upwards, they were looking to review it downwards. That would be consistent with what some other boroughs have already done, and you'll know that. And I'll give you an example of Brent, our neighbours, who changed the provision to unpaid leave back in 2019. One of the things that triggered Brent to do that was also the advice that ACAS have issued on observance of religious festivals, where they talk quite strongly about it being unpaid, not paid, and they give reasons for that. I'm not going to go into detail. People can go and read the ACAS website if they want to see what ACAS say on that. So basically, if it were to be any proposals to increase the pool of staff who were allowed to access this, whilst the council may consider that it has the authority to put that in, and it does because it's a local condition of service, I would urge that any such attempt is only done so after a very, very detailed consultation with the head teacher group. You wouldn't want to do something that might make life even more difficult for them. And I don't think this is at all about issues to do with discrimination against any groups. We've got practicing Muslims amongst our head teacher group who also observe Eid. And I know because I've spoken to some of them recently. So it's not about that, but it is a little bit about how there is inconsistency in the way in which it's applied. And sometimes I will suggest, I would think there might be some skepticism that when you do get different people coming forward requesting different days, are they actually observing the religious festival or not? And it's very difficult to establish the facts behind that. So I just wanted to put, if you like, a little bit of a counterbalance and to confirm, and our head teachers are extremely reasonable people. They've proved that all the time, and they've proved it during the pandemic. But they've also found that this is a very difficult issue to deal with every year. And Stefan's right, we've just gone through the celebration of Eid, and that brought quite a number of inquiries from our schools, which we had to deal with and try to support in the best way we could. So I do accept it's a very sensitive issue. I also accept the strength of feeling that some people have about it. But like most things, there's more than one side to this. And if you start looking, and I've started asking my colleagues in London just to start getting a feel for what they're doing. Although I've only had 3 replies so far, I can cast the net further. They're all giving unpaid at the moment, not paid. So we're almost standing out. Well, you'd probably see it as a beacon. Some may not, but sorry, Mandy. That's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a number of hands raised, and Amanda, I've seen your request as well. At the moment, they're all any new colleagues. So I'm dropping a very large hint, perhaps to Paulette, if you'd like to say something from an ANASWT perspective. But the order in which I saw them was Matt, Amanda, and then Stefan. So Matt.
Thank you, Mandy. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of lend my support to some of Danny's comments. Obviously, we're only here speaking on behalf of teachers, but we do. I mean, I have a significant proportion of support staff members at my school, and I really do I agree with his assertion around concerns around a 2-tiered system. And when I have members approach me, it does sometimes feel like 2 different worlds if it's a teacher or support staff. So I think it's absolutely right that certainly I'd like to see all my membership have access to free paid days of religious leave, and obviously extending that across the borough as well. And I think it's really important. As teachers, I speaking as a teacher, like teaching assistants, support staff pastorally, they're so essential for schools, and they really have been taking hits in terms of salary and conditions over the last few years with budget cuts. So I definitely would love, as a teacher, to see that right extended to them as well, because I think, you know, they do such tremendous work. I know Danny's members do, our members do. So yeah, I just wanted to weigh in my support for that.
Okay, thank you. Amanda?
So I wanted to echo what Matt said, but also wanted to bring up something, having talked to colleagues over Eid. And there's a lot of, I mean, I know that Mark's very sensitive to this too, but there's a lot of, you know, heartache around that time when you can't be with your families. So staff have bent over backwards during this period to take their days that fits in with other people of the same faith. So they're not inconveniencing the head too much. And there's a real awareness of that. It worries me a little bit when we're talking about perhaps a lack of professional trust with these members, with these colleagues, because it is their holy time, their most special time of the year for some of them. And how they choose to take that time is up to them. So for one of my members of staff, she chose to take it on a day when all of her family were not going to be around. They were all meeting the day before. But to make it easier for other members of staff, she took it the following day. And this happens all the time. And I think we need to be mindful that some of our colleagues might well be traveling, so they want to take that extra day, others may not. And every teacher that I work with is so conscientious, they're going to try and do the right thing and minimize the disruption in school. So I think, though I see where Mark's coming from, I think there needs to be a little bit more, perhaps a little bit more trust that people are doing the best that they can. And interestingly, I've just been speaking to a colleague earlier today that is very upset that she didn't know she could take more than one day. And as I've said, missed out on a huge family Eid event, like, you know, Christmas Day for myself as a, you know, as a Catholic. It's like that's not right. And that's something that we need to be mindful of, and we need to protect that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Before I bring Stefan in, is there anybody else who wants to say something? For you know, I'm directing my thought, my comment towards Paulette, really.
I can understand the concern by the NEU and the other support staff union with regards to support staff not being able, or not being on the same level playing ground as teachers when it comes to Eid. But surely when contracts are being negotiated and religious differences are made aware to head teachers, then that would have been something that would have been negotiated by individuals as well as by their unions. It's just a question.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's clear from the way that things are here at the moment, is that support staff don't have that right to paid leave that teacher unions have negotiated. So that's where we're at.
So then shouldn't it surely then be up to the NEU and those support unions to then have those conversations with head teachers? But from what I'm also understanding from the conversation is that Ealing so far is the only borough that's allowing paid leave. I know it's for teachers, but that conversation needs to be had.
It certainly needs to be had, and I don't think Ealing is the only borough. Just to make that clear. Stefan, would you like to say something?
Thank you. That'd be my last comment.
And Matt, would you like to lower your hand?
In talking to head teachers, we certainly acknowledge that this can be, first of all, quite a logistical difficulty, and in some situations might even be a safeguarding concern. And that has always been recognised in terms of the difficulty around it. One of the questions around why one member would want to take one day and another member in the same school wants to take 2 days, I have been able to resolve by asking, even though I totally agree with Amanda's comment about about a lack of about professional trust, I have suggested, and this has been regularly agreed by head teachers, that if a letter has come from the imam or religious leader from the mosque or the gurdwara or the temple, that should therefore be sufficient, because it's not saying I'm taking it, it's because their mosque, church, temple, gurdwara have said that this is so, and that's why it varies from one mosque to another mosque. The other comment that I wanted to say was that whilst we definitely are aware that a couple of neighbouring boroughs have reduced it, as Mandy said, there are many local authorities that most certainly do hold on to it. And yes, you are right, Mark, we do certainly hold on to it as a beacon. And I think that point about Ealing being a beacon is particularly important, considering that we've just seen the biggest uprising in terms of Black Lives Matter, which is bigger than the civil rights movement in the 1960s with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And we certainly do consider that those who have a minority faith, whether that's Buddhist, Sikh, Hindu, Muslim or Jews, should not be penalised for being able to practice their faith, either in terms of being discriminated against and or financially. And it was something that was achieved in Ealing following the National Front, which was a fascist organisation in the 70s, and the murder of Blair Peach by the police on that demonstration. And out of that, the right for teachers to be able to take paid religious leave was secured. And we would very much insist that that maintains, and that's why I'm asking Cam for that confirmation that this will continue.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I don't know whether, Cam, you want to answer that direct question. I'm sure after 2 days in the job, you're liable to say, I'll have to look into that. But do you want to say something now, Cam? I can see, Mark, I can see you've put your hand back up as well, so I'll come to you in a moment. So, Cam.
I was going to just say if we could just hear Mark first, and then
Okay.
I'll speak.
Yeah,
after.
okay. So, Mark.
Thanks, Mandy. I seem to take a long time to get my microphone and video up to speed when I click on them, so bear with me. I don't know if that's my... there I am.
There you are.
Can I just again, and it's just so that you actually see that this is not me just saying it, do go and read the ACAS website on this, because they also talk about equality issues and how equality is served by granting particular paid leave for certain religions and maybe not others, or not other people. So I just ask you to look at that. And again, what I'm saying to you is not that I agree, disagree, or whatever. I'm just saying to you, in most of these things, there are two sides always to a story or to an argument. And I accept all that colleagues have said, Amanda, Matt, Stefan, about, and Paulette about the, and Danny about the merits of the scheme. I accept that's how they feel, and they feel very strongly about it. But yeah, do go and read that advice and guidance from ACAS and see, and ACAS, who are thought of as a fairly good authority in most employment matters, and they even generally advise against giving paid leave, and they try and explain why they do that. But I'm not going to take up the time of this committee in going through that in detail. Thank you for letting me speak again, Mandy.
Okay, then, thank you. Councillor Nagpal.
I mean, I'd just like to say that I probably will need to look at this a bit more and come back to you, because I have only had this brief for 2 days. But I accept all the arguments that have been made this evening, and lots of important points have been raised. So I have taken all of those on board.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so let's move on then to the third item, which is around workload and exams. So again, this is a union side one. I can see Matt, do you want to lead on this for the union side?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just wanted to speak a little bit on my experience and just talk about the general implications of the current grading system that's in place. First, I really want to challenge the rhetoric that the government are using, that these are teacher assessed grades. They are not, because we're not assessing these grades based on our understanding experience of the students. We are marking extra assessments and using those. So it's really teacher marking. And certainly speaking to colleagues, we feel a bit insulted that the exam boards are being paid, even though they're not all they've done was re-release resources that already existed. So we don't even have new resources to use. And we've got extra workloads and we're not getting extra pay or or for a lot of us extra time. I mean, I'm in quite a fortunate situation. My school has permitted me actually some cover time to allow me the time to mark the papers I've been allocated before the deadline. So I'm grateful for that, and also colleagues and myself have had game time. So yeah, schools have adapted well, and schools have worked hard to follow the guidance. But yeah, my criticism around the rhetoric is very much levelled at the very top there. I think as well, just on the note of schools and teachers, that we've done a lot of extra work during lockdown. We've kept education going, despite all the challenges around that. Schools have seen their budgets cut. I certainly know from our discussions with leadership how much money has been spent on ensuring that the measures and restrictions are kept up, such as hand sanitizers, wipes, and so on. It costs a lot of money, and with no extra funding being provided, at least not sufficient funding. So that's definitely a problem. And then when you add on top the workload, the procedures, the time required from teachers, from school leadership to actually get these grades in place, it is monumental, and we're not being given anything substantial as a token of thank you. So it is difficult for us. And yeah, I just wanted to share that really. It is very much an area of concern. It is a temporary one, given that we all have a particular deadline to meet it by, and it will be over soon. However, I think beyond that, we have to really consider how can teachers and school leaders be compensated for the work we put in. At the very least, I'd imagine that schools would be given extra funds in the budget to make up for that. So I just really wanted to make that point. And as I said, I'm making no criticism about the schools themselves. They've worked very hard. The teachers have worked very hard. This is very much being leveled at the top. And that's the criticism I'm making is being leveled at the top. So that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Paula, I can see that you're indicating.
I agree with what my colleague has just been saying, but I also noticed that once there was a cry for teachers and schools to be refunded money, that on Friday of last week, suddenly it was announced that the exam boards would be seeking samples from schools to moderate. So why didn't they do that in the first place? You know, we've just been dumped on from a massive height. A lot of colleagues that I'm speaking to within the workplace, they're barely hanging on. They're just trying to get through to half term because the workload has been astonishing. So I'm hoping that in some ways we will be vilified when all of this process comes to an end. You know? And if there'll be something from Ealing Council to at least recognise everything that teachers, support staff as well have been doing within the education settings to recognise what we've been doing.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I mean, I think in terms of just sort of where we are at the meeting this evening, you know, I'm sure the councillors appreciate just that insight into what it's been like in schools to try and meet these deadlines. And my personal worry is that it's not over yet for this year, because you know we're trying to follow the process and submit our target assessed grades and whatever, and then I'm still waiting for the government to intervene before those results are known, and then of course afterwards there'll be a whole appeals process. So I worry for that it's not over even yet for this year. And then of course we still don't quite know what the course of the disruption from COVID will be into next year as well. Now, Julie, I noticed that you've put yourself on camera. I don't know whether you want to just make some comments at this stage.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Can you hear me okay?
Claire, that's fine.
Yes, I mean, I listening very intently to Matt's comments and Paulette's comments, and and it clearly is the most unprecedented time that has affected kind of teachers in this way. I mean, it's really hard to even think about a way around this workload issue. I think the way that Ealing schools have approached it has been exemplary. I think the commitment of individual teachers to their own students has been extraordinary. I think the very early work that our schools did and the support for departments in the initial stages, identifying the assessments to be used for grading and being clear with students and parents on what they were going to be tested on, has been really helpful. Completing those assessments with enough time for marking and moderation, that is the key issue, and it's really pleasing to note that although I'm sure it's never going to be enough time, that Matt's school were able to award that additional time, and obviously heads do have the power to award kind of discretionary days for such circumstances. I think the skillful work that schools are doing with parents and students to try and preempt appeals will be really helpful to schools, but the even heavier workload around students whose lives were significantly impacted through illness or bereavement, that can't be underestimated as well, because of all the additional documentation. And similarly, the subjects where the leadership and the quality of teaching in those subjects has significantly improved between 2017 and 2019. In a way, those schools are having to prove that point to avoid the eye of suspicion, and that doesn't seem right. And that's concerning. And I think just the toll that it's taken, and the intensity of that focus on year 11s and 13s is likely to have had an impact on children in the other year groups, I should imagine. So there isn't really any sort of happiness that can come out of this, other than the fact that if I was a student in an Ealing school, the way my teachers are working for me, I would really appreciate that, and you are saintly as far as I'm concerned, and our students are really lucky to have you. In terms of with an eye on 2022, it's clear, and I've come from the London Education Leads group last week, and we have a representative who communicates regularly with the DFE and Regional Schools Commissioner, that there's the work going into the qualification system for 2022 is based on the principles of certainty, of fairness, of deliverability. And at the moment, and you'll know, there's a consultation going on, I think it ends at the end of next week, about the adaptations that are being considered in terms of content, optionality, guidance to pupils nearer the time of the exams. And at the moment, I know that ASCL, for example, is very split on what they think will be most helpful to students, but they seem to be leaning towards the syllabus remaining broadly the same, but with focused guidance for students nearer to the exams. But obviously that's still up in the air, and we won't know until probably early June. So all I can say is I'm totally sympathetic and empathise with teachers, not least because of this hard slog, even before this period. And I was lucky enough to be invited to join schools' lessons online. I sat through about 6 lessons. And the amount of work that teachers were doing was just phenomenal. So I just want to show my appreciation to you as a group, as a profession.
Thank you very much for that. I don't know whether any of the councillors want to say something. I know a lot of you are school governors as well, so you may well be seeing some of this firsthand through those links. Anybody want to say anything? Go on, Cam and David, and then David.
I mean, I have family members who work in teaching, and they've worked really hard during this time. I mean, I've seen it firsthand, how hard they've worked, the long hours they've put in, the hard slog. And, you know, you really all should just be so proud of yourselves of how hard you've worked during this time. And, you know, the students should be very grateful.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Nagpal. Councillor Millican, and then I can see that Councillor Rice is also indicating.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. Yes, I mean, I can just add to what Cam says. I mean, clearly teachers have worked really hard. I just feel for you with the appeals process, because I would think, you know, as everyone was, all the teachers will tell you, you know, the appeals is going to go through the roof, I'd have thought. So I just feel for you there. But I'm pleased that, Matt, you know, you obviously feel, you're at Twyford, you obviously feel that the Twyford management there have given you the time. So that's good. So appreciate that. But I know it's really hard work, and I just feel for you with the appeals. And I'm sure most people would rather get back to actual exams and you get through all this. But that's for another year, of course.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rice.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I think the thing that really stands out to me is that just what you seem about some kind of injustice here, that we're not treating everyone who works within the education sphere in the same way. I mean, the teachers are just incredibly important, but they just seem to have been treated like fodder, while others, we talk about exam boards, just seem to be being treated in a far better way. And I just wish that we had a better attitude towards it, and we could actually treat everyone the same, but also incredibly well, on an equal footing, but treat everybody fairly and justly in this terrible situation.
Yeah, thanks for that. Amanda, you indicated you wanted to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, from a primary perspective, obviously the pressure isn't as immense as it is for secondary colleagues, and my heart does go out to you guys. But as a year 6 teacher, not having SATs this year, the pressure that's been taken off of those children is incredible. They would have already sat them 2 weeks ago. They were horrified when I told them that today. We were actually doing teacher assessments instead. And this is just much kinder. So actually, I disagree with the statement about bring the exams back, all's forgiven. Certainly from the primary perspective anyway, they're too young for it. And having a teacher assessment, having them doing things in fun ways, we can assess where they are and use that as a basis. We can do a test and use it as a basis for our teacher assessment. But I certainly want to see a change in the way that we treat primary school children, so they're not being assessed in the same way that they are in secondary. It's much too much for them. The other thing that I wanted to point out as well is teachers do need a rest. And one of the things that I want to make absolutely sure is that teachers aren't going to be expected to do some kind of catch up all through the summer, forcing children to do the same. In our school, our head is very clear. It's not catch up. There's nothing to catch up with. It's just gaps. They've missed it. That's it. And I'm really very, very firm on my view that I do not want teachers working over the summer. Every single teacher needs to have the summer off. This is well and truly one of those years where every minute is going to be well deserved. So I just wanted to sort of make sure that councillors weren't planning on doing any of those things, and that there would be some consideration and some push to abolish SATs completely.
Okay, thank you. Julie, I noticed that you're indicating again. Do you want to speak now? I've got Matt, and I'm sure I saw Stefan briefly as well, but go on, Julie.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Just to come back on summer schools and holiday provision. So we are absolutely committed to offering holiday provision for children right across the age range, and particularly in the most disadvantaged wards, because we want children to have that particularly the social interaction and the structured opportunities over the summer. The emphasis of the holiday provision is not on academic learning, although there may be aspects of literacy delivered in a fun way, maths delivered in a fun way, and I think I'm delighted how many providers have come forward to offer that. We also know that I think virtually all of our secondary schools are planning to offer a 2-week summer school. It's offered to eligible pupils. These will be year 6s moving into year 7. Again, it's designed to be fun. It's designed to support children feel excited about the next stage of their learning, to have access perhaps to areas of that secondary schools are able to, science laboratories and things like that they wouldn't normally have access to in primary. And it's a combination of physical, emotional, social, and academic work. So we are very keen to offer that to our children, and we'll be working with our primary colleagues to recommend the kinds of children who would benefit from that over the summer. So just wanted to come back on that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So Stefan, were you indicating?
I think Amanda spoke eloquently enough for us about the exam factory culture.
Yeah, okay. So Matt, if we can finish with you on this perhaps then.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, Chair. I just wanted to just pay my gratitude to the kind words from all the councillors and Julie, and also pick up on something that Julie mentioned. It was around actually the well-being of children, and because of the pressures that teachers and schools are being put under, actually our focus has been taken away, actually taking care of the kids. I mean, that first week back after the last lockdown, you could really see in their faces, the anxiety, the worry, the stress. It was really quite something. And there's definitely trauma there that still needs to be dealt with. And right now we're actually a little bit impeded from, helping them, because we're so focused on year 11s and 13s and getting the grading done. And and certainly to pick up on the appeals process, which was mentioned. Actually, a lot of the workload comes from actually sort of making it appear as appeals proof as possible, these grades. So when the appeals do come in, so we're adding comments, we're marking loads of assessments. So actually the anxiety with the upcoming appeals, and we're going to assume there are some, is actually adding to the workload most definitely, and certainly the thought and the time taken by leadership to put together all this definitely is coming through, and it's adding to our workload. And just obviously, I mean, I've already expressed my gratitude for having the time to mark, but equally that's time I'm not teaching my other classes, and that just adds to my point. Actually, the focus has been taken away from the well-being of the children and sort of the academics of year 11 and 13, and that's pressure being put right from above. And and just picking up on the catch-up part as well, I do welcome the idea of a holiday provision. My question would be, would this be voluntary from colleagues, and how would it be compensated? But I certainly like the idea that it's more focused on well-being and taking care rather than academic focus, because as Amanda said, it's gaps. You can't really catch them up, not in a reasonable way. It needs to be a long-term plan, and a lot of thinking needs to go into it going forward. We can't just do it in the space of 2 weeks or 3 weeks or even 2 months. This might take years in some cases, particularly with certain age groups. So I just wanted to come back on that, and thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, I think we'll move on from that point now. And so just to come now to funding and restructuring. So this was a union side point that was raised. So Stefan, are you going to speak to that?
Yes, I am. It's Julie, it's a follow-on from conversations, Mark, that we've had in other meetings. In London, 7%, there's been a 7% drop in uptake in primary stroke nursery reception places. And we are seeing the effects of that in Ealing as we speak right now. And I'd welcome, he's gone. In terms of the fact that that's impacting largely on support staff and also assistant heads and deputy head teachers as primary schools downgrade from reduce a form, and sometimes in some cases to 2 forms. They go from 4 form to 2 form. So I've got a question in terms of, is there any more future projections in terms of whether the uptake is going to continue to decline? And if so, what strategies or what contingency plans have we got around that? That was one question that I'm very keen, because in some London boroughs, we are talking about the possibility of schools closing. Now, I've been given reassurances that I believe I've been given reassurances that that's not on the cards anywhere near in Ealing. But if the uptake continues to decline, then that may be a consideration sometime in the not too distant future. So, and that will have and that raises many questions. The other question that I've asked before, and I'm going to repeat the question in this forum, is in terms of the secondary schools. So when I've asked the question in the past, I've asked, why have we expanded secondary school provision when there is clearly a shortage of spaces? And the answer I get back was that quite a number of our students, in comparison to other local authorities, leave the borough and go to schools outside of the borough, i.e. Harrow or Brent or Hounslow. But I believe that that's been the case for a number of years. And if that's been the case for a number of years, why then did we not take that into consideration when approving new schools being allowed, new secondary schools being allowed to open? Because that's going to have an impact on jobs, on the stability of the existing schools that are already in place.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I don't know whether one of the officers wants to respond to that first off. Julie,
Yeah.
you've just been muted. Yeah.
I can cover that.
Oh, sorry, Tamara. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so just in terms of projections for primary schools, the comments Stefan made around the kind of London-wide picture, that has been the experience of Ealing. There are particular drop-offs in some areas, so it's affecting some areas more than others in primary sector. The substantial drop-off of in-year kind of migration movements linked to Brexit and COVID has been difficult to project, and I think really the projections going forward for me, as you know, being responsible for place planning in the area, we're very much looking for the medium to the long term. So you'll note that there was a really substantial increase in demand over the last 10 years, and now there's been a substantial decrease in demand. And for me, you know, from a place planning and capacity perspective, a school closure at this stage is not on the table. It's obviously something we'll need to continually monitor, and we're working with schools as individuals and in groups in areas to ensure they can remain sustainable through that and be resilient as far as they can in managing the reductions in roll. So yes, there are no plans for closing schools, and there is support going into schools so that they can you know, do their 3-year planning, can see the funding reductions coming, and can avoid as far as possible you know, reorganisations and redundancies of staff.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tamara.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else who wants to say anything other than Stefan? Anybody else want to come in? So Stefan, back to you then.
There was a second part of the question around the secondary schools, and a quick question, follow-up question around the 3-year planning, which is wise. And I know that this has been encouraged by yourselves, which is welcomed. How many schools do you think still need to do a 3-year plan? And can you answer the figure?
Yeah.
Schools, please?
So in terms of high schools, yes, it goes back to the same point about planning for capacity over a long term. the particular area of concern does have a very low rate of retention, so high numbers of students going across the borough boundary. You know, at the time of planning that school, it was anticipated that demand would be higher, and there's a combination of factors of a school in the area going into effectively you know, what would have been special measures and needing to convert, and ultimately parents have choice at that stage and will vote with their feet and potentially choose schools over the borough boundary. That the new school will be opening, and the new school is part of the same trust, and we're working with that trust to you know, again, be as resilient as possible to those changes, and you know, planning their kind of, you know, the work in the area to retain as many students as possible. It's been very unfortunate that, you know, COVID has hit, schools haven't been able to have results and haven't been able to be re-inspected to build kind of on their reputation. So I think there's a particularly acute combination of issues there, but ultimately, you know, there are enough students in the area and parents have choice.
Okay, is that okay for that, Stefan?
And the future?
Yeah, so in terms of the 3-year planning, so it's now a requirement. So it's part of the Ealing scheme for financing schools that schools all have to submit a 3-year plan. So that's maintained in foundation schools, not academies. They have a separate process that doesn't come into the LA for that. So we'll be receiving them in May. The LA will be reviewing those, and we're already in contact with a number of schools who either have kind of more immediate concerns or have concerns this year and going into the future. So we're working with those individual schools. I'd say generally in Ealing, 3-year plans are broadly well developed across schools. So it's something we've been working with schools on for the last 3 or 4 years. Whereas in a number of other areas, it's not quite as well developed. So I think school leaders have, you know, continually developed those skills and have largely been anticipating financial challenges and being proactively working to resolve those to minimise the impact on staff. There are particular issues in some schools, but broadly the financial management in schools in Ealing is good.
Okay, thanks for that. Stefan, I can see that you want to come back in, but Councillor Millican's indicated, so I'm going to take him first.
You're muted.
You need to unmute again.
Sorry.
There you are. Yeah.
The quote of COVID, isn't it? You're on mute. Yeah. So I mean, I'm just stating the obvious, really. But I mean, exactly as Tamara says, most schools have done this now, been required to do a 3-year plan. But it's extremely difficult to do. I mean, as somebody who's involved with several schools in the borough, it's extremely difficult to do because, you know, the Chancellor Exchequer is struggling, obviously, understanding the national finances. You know, they've been run to rat shit for the last 12 months. Goodness knows where they'll be in the next year and the year after. So to expect schools to do a 3-year plan is very difficult. However, it does focus the minds, and I can appreciate the value of it. But I have to say, I have sympathy for the school governors and the head teachers have to pull plans together. It is extremely difficult.
Okay, thanks for that. Stefan.
If I may, and please correct me if this reflection is unfair. In terms of the secondary schools, it seems as if the answer is that there was the capacity, and when we thought of it, there was growing capacity, and then we got hit blindside by COVID and Brexit, and therefore that reduced the numbers, and therefore that's why we've got more secondary schools than we have at the moment, and it is still parental choice, and therefore they can come back. However, I still, if that's a sort of polarized, crude reflection, we've always known that the parents have got choice, and we have known for many a year that the parents are still choosing to send their children out of the borough, and yet we still issued more secondary schools, or more allowed or endorsed the idea for more secondary schools to be built, even though we've always known that a large number, too many, I agree, but a large number of our parents were sending their children outside. So if that was always known, why did we still allow it?
Mara.
Yeah, I think to some extent I've already answered it, Stefan. As quickly as demand has increased, it's decreased, and building a school and creating that capacity needs to be managed over an extended period of time. There are a combination of contextual factors in that particular area and with the schools concerned, and essentially, you know, my role in being responsible for, you know, parents and young people having fair access to good quality provision. It's important to create capacity within the borough and within that area. It is very difficult for those, you know, those schools to manage, and, you know, school funding is linked to pupil numbers, and it's for the trust and for, you know, with the support of the local authority and working with the primary schools in the area to, you know, really work with the community and to retain as many students as they can.
Yeah, okay then. So I think it could just go backwards and forwards for a while. So I'm just gonna, I think it's probably time to stop that now. So I think we're at the end of the agenda, aren't we, at this point? And so we've got a date for another meeting, but I just want to return to the fact that we talked about the need to review the terms of reference. So if that can be agreed, then we're not due to meet again till November. So I'm sure that's something that people can get you know, have discussions around between now and then. Councillor Nagpal, would you like to say anything in closing?
Well, just at the start, I received a very warm welcome, so thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to the Education and Children's Services brief. And I hope that I'll be able to make much more contribution at our next meeting. As I said, I've only had this brief for 2 days, but what some of the things we have discussed today, I will take away and come back. And yes, we do need to look at the terms of reference between now and the next meeting.
Yeah, okay. Stefan, I think your hand's still up from before, and I didn't understand your message in the chat.
The date of the next meeting is December, not November, Chair.
Yeah, December, is it? Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, okay. So I think we're done. So the live recording, if you were watching on YouTube, thank you very